I survived a cerebral hemorrhage when I was 23 years old. I was living in Manhattan at the time. But, my folks brought me back to Boston to rehab. I had to learn how to swallow, had to teach myself to walk. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to work after having the stroke. And 5 years after the stroke, I finally found a job in financial services. It wasn't exactly a life's ambition, but no heavy lifting, lots of phone work. It was interesting. So I started working there. I had to take exams to be registered for various levels of position. And they kept promoting me. I kept taking exams. I kept passing them. It was looking great. I thought this was it. Unfortunately, with each exam that I had to take for each registration, the National Associations of Securities Dealers required that I have fingerprints. And, my left hand, for all the work I put into it, is still paralyzed, and getting prints of a paralyzed hand isn't easy. They kept calling me down for more fingerprints, and I was on a first-name basis with the guys that do this stuff, and I had ruined more shirts, more white shirts that these guys are wearing. Because you get the ink on the finger, you let go of it and flick, you get all these black spots all over a white shirt. This is not nice. The security told me that the problem was that the National Association of Security Dealers was kicking out my fingerprints because they weren't clear. Mom was selectman in the hometown, and she asked the chief of police if they would be able to print my fingers. Went down there, and the sergeant who does this all the time went through the procedure, and no, he didn't get clear prints, but he signed the card, made a notation, put on the town seal, and I figured I'm home free. How can the NASD kick out fingerprints that were from the town police department? 4 or 5 months later, right before Thanksgiving, I got a phone call from somebody in the Human Resources Department, and she said, all your registrations have been purged. The NASD purged all your registrations. Your fingerprints? Well, I'm like, my fingerprints? Well, my hand is paralyzed. What do they want me to do? How am I going to leave prints of these fingers on anything? I went to my supervisor, my supervisor's supervisor, my supervisor's supervisor's supervisor. I went all the way up to vice president, complaining and saying, this is not acceptable. How are we going to deal with this? Their solution? Oh, you just take your exams over again. And that's going to get my fingerprints through the NASD screening. How? So, clearly this is not a place where I'm going to be able to work. But I did a lot of research afterwards. And I called the Boston Police Department. I said, how would you handle something like this? How would you get prints on someone who had a paralyzed hand? And the guy said, oh, the FBI has a procedure for that. It's in their book. And I went to the Federal Publications Office and found a copy of The Science of Fingerprints. There's a whole section in The Science of Fingerprints that describes how one is to get fingerprints from a paralyzed hand. If I can find this out, why couldn't the company? This is as much of a reasonable accommodation as ramping stairs, amplifying a telephone receiver, perhaps magnifying a computer screen so that a person with disability can do the job.